felt safety is a concept that is so central to everything that we do. And I don't mean just we, James Trail, I mean every room I walk into, you know, every room you walk into, every room every one of our listeners walk into.
Meredith Shuman, welcome to the James Trail Podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Zach. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Pretty good. It's we're doing something different on this one. We decided to turn the microphone around a bit, which is funny because the microphones are pointed the same way anyway. But we're decided to kick you out of the host chair and bring in your producer to ask you questions, because I think that we do get to hear from you a lot, but you're such a gracious host that you leave so much space for other people to talk and share their life and story that we don't get to go super deep into you and like your why and all that stuff. So I hope that's okay, because we're here. So
no, it's more than okay. I think it's going to be really fun, and it's fun to do it with a friend. So
That's true. That's true. I went to Colorado Springs not too long ago to do some filming and stayed at your house and met your dog and
experienced the altitude.
Threw up in your sink. It was awesome. I truly could not feel closer to anybody.
We had a few moments.
Oh my gosh, that was an
I will
intense
own
day.
it as my fault for day 2 taking you way up into the mountains without enough water. That's on me.
I was like, I'm also a grown adult who could have thought ahead a little more and packed just a tiny bit more water and snacks, but you know, it's fine. We digress. We're moving forward. It's okay.
I'm usually the nerd that like people are like, ugh, why are you bringing that? Like, you don't need the 10 essentials, Meredith.
But
and
this time we're on the way, and she's like, shoot, I don't have bear spray. I'm like, oh, cool. Great.
You're like, bear what?
Bear, cool, awesome.
I know. I was truly focused on content and like not thinking about, oh, we're on a mountain, by the way.
You and me both were thinking about content, because I was not thinking about bears or water, nothing like
basics.
that. You know, just the basic survival stuff. But let me start us off with not our signature question. I've heard you answer the superhero question over and over and over.
Yes.
We all have. And so I decided to ask you a different one, and this one is a little more of a would you rather. And so, would you rather be able to eat anything you want and have it be perfect nutrition, or have only 1 hour of sleep per day and be fully rested?
So I'm going to go with option 1, but it's for a reason that may be unexpected. Couple of reasons. I love food, and I love the cultural and social aspects of food and all the things. And so, but that's actually not the reason why I would answer this way. And the reason is that I appreciate the passage of time, and I love anticipating the next day or the next month or the next year. And so to know that I would only be sleeping 1 hour a night, and that would delay, it would just extend the time so dramatically.
Like how many years
so.
to your life does that add? I didn't even do the math, but you might be adding, like that you're awake and conscious.
I also am not so addicted to productivity that I see that as a goal. You know, like the added hours would bring work time and productivity and whatever. Like, I don't care. I do care, in an ethical sort of way, but I don't need 8 more hours of my life to be work related. I really don't. So, and I love my work. I love what I get to do.
Fair, but you also live in a really pretty place where it's nice to not work.
It's dark here too at night. So, and we have wild animals. So I really don't feel like 2 a.m. is the time that I would be outdoors appreciating the outdoors.
You don't even have your bear spray with you. So
I mean,
what could you even
I would
do?
need like 14 bear sprays. Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Well, that is very illuminating. That does tell me a lot about you. Because honestly, I wasn't sure how you were going to answer this. Because I've heard you allude to both before, which is why it popped into my head to even ask. But yeah, okay. I'm glad that you're not going to be up at 3 a.m. whatever you do at 3 a.m. working.
It's a desperate moment if that's happening. It's tough. A really desperate moment. Just be aware.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I figured aside from that opener question, like the actual like getting to the meat of stuff, like a good question to ask would be about the big T word, which is trauma. What is it? Like, what the heck is trauma? And like, why does that matter to me at all?
Yeah. So this question is what we strive to meet people in literally every day with our online content, workshops, and everything. And there's a lot of different ways to describe or explain what trauma is. And I'm not convinced that what I'm about to say is the only way, but the way that I like to think about trauma is really, it just encompasses mental health challenges that we face. It doesn't have to be, I survived the earthquake in 2008 living in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It doesn't have to be, I was in a car wreck this morning. It doesn't have to be, I felt overlooked and ignored as a child. Like it can be any or all of those things. It can be something as simple as I'm just in a really depressed time in my life or a season where I feel super anxious. Like all of that in my mind really is a part of the mental health challenges that come along with trauma. And, we talk about trauma in a lot of different ways. Some people define it as big T trauma and little t trauma. And they say that big T trauma is, abuse, neglect prior to the age of 18. And little t trauma is everything else. And while I understand that definition, I don't like that definition. And the reason why is it puts things on a scale to compare. And I mean, 100%, yes, childhood trauma is a huge challenge for any of us that have come out of that. But so would be, a massive thing that happens in adulthood. Like I'm in a car wreck and I break my femur and my spouse dies. Like, okay, that counts. That story has value and intensity in our lives. And so we try, at James Schrock, we try to step away from some of the comparison aspects of trauma and try to step into what feels hard for you in terms of mental health, in terms of spiritual health, like what feels hard to you. And those are the spaces that we love to meet people in.
Yeah, I feel that comparison piece, because like we all suffer trauma and we all have these at some level, but there's always that thing in the back of your head that's like, is this big enough to even mention? Like, is this like, because like there's a million other, like, I mean, we see it on our phones all the time. It's one of the many downsides of having access to the entire world, which is we see the most horrible things happening, on this side or the other side of the world. And so what is my little ache and pain in comparison to that? But what you're saying is, no, like that's just the wrong lens to be looking through. I love that. What is trauma-informed care then? Because we have trauma, and then there's some connective piece that organizations miss, that like churches, businesses, all that we miss. Medical field. What is this connected piece that is trauma-informed care?
Yeah, so one of the things that a lot of us are, doing every day in our life is just our work. We work at Chick-fil-A, or we work at Target, or we work, at the stock market, or we work at a church, and we think that our work is, our inbox for email, or the meeting that I just had, or this program I'm working on, this project, but like our work life is infused with relationships with people who have faced all kinds of challenges. And that's including me. Like the self and the others, we are all interacting in a space where, somebody's in the middle of considering divorce, and somebody else, their teenager yelled at them this morning, and somebody else, they have a parent that, an elderly parent that's going to go on hospice, and somebody else, experienced things as a child, and the way you're directing that meeting right now is activating them or triggering them into a response that feels very defensive. And so there's so many mental health, emotional, even spiritual things going on in every space, in every room. And if we think that our work life is just that lane of me working on this project, or me finishing this whatever, or attending this meeting, we're missing the opportunity to step into these relationships in ways that care for each other. And so that's just work life. Now you take it to home life or family life, or however you want to define that. Of course, the same is true. My kids, they're all individual people with their own challenges that they face. Myself, my partner, my spouse, people that I don't live in the same house with, my neighbor, the person I have Thanksgiving with every year. Like, just all of our relationships, both in work and outside of work, can be impacted in positive ways by understanding mental health challenges, by understanding trauma and how it impacts them and how it impacts me.
How have you seen this play out? Give me an example of maybe an area or somewhere, or just whatever you can share, where you saw there was something that was directly impacting, whether it was like a leader was saying something or implementing something that was impacting people, and then maybe how James Trail, you work together to address it, to even see it, because I think some of this is just like we just don't see it half the time because we just have a hard time looking outside of ourselves a lot. I know that when I drive. Nobody is a real person when I'm driving, but then when you think about it for about 10 seconds, you're like, that's a universe going on in there with hurts and pains and all that stuff. But so can you give me something tangible that has happened? That's
a great phrase. There's a universe going on right there. I feel like that's the title of your book right there. That is a brilliant sort of summation of everyone's individual world. And then so when each person's all their interconnectedness and disconnectedness with every relationship that they have, what you're kind of calling a universe, all of our relationships, and I step into a room. I've heard it said before like this, and I did come up with this. I love this though. It's like one nervous system meeting another nervous system.
That's good.
It's like, can you picture the brain and the brain stem and the spine and all the CNS, all that, and then it's like, hi, and our body carries trauma. If you've not read The Body Keeps Score, it's brilliant work. Our bodies carry, the things that have happened to us into every room that we're in. And so I've sat in, so to answer your question, I have, entered into rooms with, say, for example, it was a staff meeting. Say there's 8 people in the room. And let's just say that, we all have a goal. This staff meeting is to de-silo and to make sure everybody's connecting, make sure everybody's communicating on the different projects, all the things that are going on, blah, blah, blah. And let's say that the leader who carries the authority in the room, so the boss or the director, whoever in the room, is giving more attention to 2 particular people in the room and whatever they have to say about this project or that project. And then let's say that next week, the same thing happens. And these 2 people kind of get the bulk of this person's attention, the director's attention. And then let's say week 3 happens and there's another person over here who is faithfully attending, but they're more introverted. Maybe they don't, because of challenges they faced in childhood, maybe they don't believe that their voice is valuable. And so then that director, through probably no intention, is feeding into that message for that individual sitting in the room. Oh, it's true. You don't have a voice. Or if you do speak, like, it doesn't matter as much as these people over here. And so then this person can start to either develop a negative attitude about themselves, about the organization, about the team, about the director, about those two. So then things start to be filtered through that impression that this introverted individual has about everything going on around them. So then the 4th meeting, they walk in, and now what are the dynamics? Oh, introverted person, you have something to say? Oh, go ahead. And the person's like, no, I'm good. You know what I mean? So if we don't understand those kinds of dynamics, then we really miss opportunities, because I promise you, by the 3rd, 4th, 6th month, this introverted person is looking for another place to work.
Yeah,
if
they're empowered.
They do not feel empowered, or they're just sinking into themselves, and they're doing the minimal amount to get paid to put food on the table. And I mean, I've seen some of that firsthand, and I have also seen through getting to work with James Trail, those kinds of dynamics start to like iceberg, like the flow of iceberg, like kind of break apart a little bit.
Yeah.
And like start to say, oh, wait, hold on. And I've been able to sit in the room with people who are like, well, I've never felt like you cared, like talking to someone else. I never felt like you understood me. And that person saying, dude, I had no idea that's what you thought. And it's some of this interpersonal kinds of things that really just takes some time to be aware of.
Yeah, my first question off of that is like, for the leader, like what are next steps for a leader in that sort of situation? Like what is then moving towards like trauma informed care practices look like, for like what are like some tangible next steps for them?
Our website is jamestrail.org.
Exactly.
And we would love to come alongside businesses, churches, organizations, hospitals, schools. We are in faith space and non-faith-based space. And this is what we do. We love to not only bring content in a way that helps us to understand the 2 nervous systems, or 8 nervous systems sitting in the room, but also to give some language to how to communicate in those kinds of moments. And it takes a shift. That's the other thing, that we're a little bit different. We don't, at James Trail, we don't come once and say, okay, you guys good? Cool. All right, so you're trauma informed? All right, bye. No, we come back, right? Yeah. Because it takes a minute. You hear this content, you start to realize and see the iceberg breaking apart a little bit, and you're like, okay, but I'm so used to doing it this way. I want to care for the other nervous systems in the room. I want to understand people better. I want to be an empathetic listener. But I need time. I need to figure out how to do that.
Time and practice is what, I mean, this sounds so much like therapy. I mean, this just sounds like when you go to therapy, you're not, there. No therapist worth their, whatever salt. I mean, they're not going to be like, all right, good, you're fixed. Like, I imparted all of my knowledge onto you. Right. And most of the time, therapists like only give you language to speak, but like you have to discover a lot of that stuff because it won't stick otherwise. So this feels so similar in that sense, that they wouldn't even have language to speak with, and it would take practice and like I there's got to be. I mean, that's a hard process. That has to be painful at times. But I guess how have those times gone? Like how do you feel like I mean, obviously you're going to say, great. It's like, this is James Trail. But like, truly, like, what are some of those transformations that you've seen? Like, you don't even have to be specific about them, but like, what is that like when you get breakthroughs in that? Because I know those are long roads and long processes. So like, what is that feeling like? Like, what is it like in the room? And like, does that, I would imagine that would inspire like more change in that sense, like more ways to keep digging and all that. So speak to that.
Well, I would start by saying I would not, step into a space to challenge a group in any sort of way that I haven't already challenged myself. I am on the trail, I am on the journey. I have really had to face some difficult things myself and wrestle. And so, I mean, on many levels, I really get it from my own skin, from my own point of view. One time I was doing a workshop and it was like day 3, and I'm, sharing some really practical, tangible tips for people that, as you walk away today, like here are some handholds. And this woman started to cry. And I happened to know a little bit about her story because I'd spent a little bit of time with her over that 3-day period, just at, on breaks and stuff. And I knew that, she's a widow. Her husband was killed in war, and she had like 2 little kids. I don't know if that moment was like just feeling seen, if that's where her emotion was coming from. I don't know if it was fear of trying something new. This was not a one-on-one session, so I didn't really dive in and ask questions, of course, in front of the group, but I could really sense a shift going on, and not just in her, but in the room. And there were others who were starting to have some feelings. And what was really powerful, what came to mind for me in that moment, that was a church. It was a faith-based setting. And so I was able to say, I want to honor all the emotion that's happening in the room right now. And this is real and important and good for us to have a moment to let some emotion flow. That's number 1. And number 2 is, I know this is day 3 and I'll be leaving tomorrow, but the magic that's happening in the room is not as important or great as what the Lord wants to do going forward through all of us, in all of us. Yes, there's some really cool things happening in the room right now, and I know the Lord is using it. I know the Holy Spirit is present. But also, now this is your content. I don't own this, this is yours, and you can decide what you want to do with it. And if you're a person of faith, how you want to lean in with the Lord on what this looks like going forward. And so instead of feeling like, oh gosh, I don't feel empowered, I was in that moment trying to help folks to feel empowered to step into what the content means for them.
Just like to look behind the curtain, I live in Oklahoma City. You're in Colorado Springs. We're not generally in the same room together for these workshops, but I can't wait till I finally get to go to one. It does remind me of a question that I had because you have talked in the past about these being customizable, like about like the culture of an organization, but also like the cultural taboos, the interpersonal dynamic, all that stuff, like
Sure.
all the stuff that kind of comes into play with that. How do you and James Trail, how do we take account of that as we move into these spaces? Because sometimes that's like a work culture, sometimes that's like a different culture, like you're in like Mexico or something. What sort of prep goes into that? Like what's on your heart and mind as you go into those spaces?
I love that you're asking that, because it is absolutely central to who we are as James Trail, and it's central on my heart every time I enter a space. I am, this middle-aged white female, and so I'm limited in my scope of understanding. And so, but I know what it is to feel misunderstood or to feel not seen and heard. And so I carry that into the space. I don't carry it as a wound. I carry it as a reminder. So I would never want to commit the same offense on like the harsh side, or even overlook something on a neglectful side. And I'm also kind of, extroverted and talkative, and so it would be very easy for me to just like keep talking, or be an Enneagram 7 in the room or whatever. And so I try to, I know I don't nail this nearly enough, but I try to, honor the person in front of me, whether it's, 500 or 1, in speaking from a perspective of I try to remember whose presence in the room is the most important. And number 1, because I'm a person of faith, that's the Lord. And number 2, it's them. It's not me. I'm not the second or first most important person in the room. I just happen to be the one carrying the content, or carrying the workshop in, or, carrying the whatever it is in. Like, I just happen to be that person. And so when we're considering, if it's here in Colorado Springs, technically this is my home. This should be my culture. But I could step into a church. Well, that church has its own church culture. I could step into a business. Same thing. A school. Same thing. I could step into someone else's Thanksgiving dinner. There's a culture there. There's a family, relational, Thanksgiving culture there. And so just like I would not step into that Thanksgiving dinner and be like, well, we're watching football, we're having turkey, so y'all sit down. Like, I would never, right? That sounds silly.
As the Lord intended, for sure. Yes. Right. Like, you're 100% right.
All right.
It's fine.
But I can't assume that is like that particular culture of that Thanksgiving dinner. So I try, again, I don't nail this enough, but I really try to ask questions beforehand. I try to gain some understanding. And if I'm stepping into a business, it's questions like, how's morale? Has there been turnover lately? How big is the group? How recently have some of these folks been hired? How well do these folks know their role and their job? Like, some of those kinds of questions. Is faith a topic that we're going to be discussing today? So if it's a business, school, church, like those questions are relevant. As I'm stepping into Mexican culture, I've lived there, but that is not my home culture. And I have so much to learn every moment that I'm there. And so I am leaning into my hosts, into the people that I'm in contact with, to really, want to understand how to step in the best way. Here's an example. So in October, I had the privilege of going to Mazatlan, Mexico, to serve with an organization called Shoulder to Shoulder. They come alongside churches to provide, programming and all kinds of ways and support to support the local church. And one of the things that they do is after school programs. And so I'm trying to remember how many they have around the city, but it's several. And they said, Meredith, we really want you to come and visit these sites while you're here. This is my second trip because, as James Stroh, we do follow-up. So this is my second trip. So they said, this trip, we really want you to go and see the sites. And my initial response is, oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. I would love to see the sites. My follow-up to that was hesitation, because I don't want to be that white lady walking in the room from the United States to create tension. Like, I would have something to say that you're doing it wrong. Like, you're not using trauma-informed practices right there, and I see you over there. Like that. Yeah. I would never want that to be the vibe when I walk in the room. As we're talking through some of the details of my trip, I kind of, tried to express that. Like, are you sure this is like the right thing to do? Are you sure that I won't come across in a negative way? I don't want to make people uncomfortable. And what happened that I couldn't really predict is, as I'm getting there and I'm talking more with my host, basically they said, Meredith, you're coming in as a part of us. These churches trust Shoulder to Shoulder. They trust us. They appreciate us. They know who we are. And they know we're not going to bring in some tyrant that's going to walk around and tell them all the things they're doing wrong. And I was like, oh, That's so good. That's so brilliant. And it did not like make sense to me until I was there in the moment that I was literally riding the coattails of and being, invited in by a trusted group. And so that just like changed all the felt safety for everybody in the room. Yeah. And so, felt safety is a concept that is so central to everything that we do. And I don't mean just James Trail. I mean, every room I walk into, every room you walk into, every room every one of our listeners walk into. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's a great answer to the question. The felt safety thing is so huge. And I feel like leaders either get this right or wrong. Like it's very rarely in between. Like it's like, this room's safe for me, and it should be safe for you then too. Whereas it should be something more like listening. And I mean, what I heard in all that was 2 healthy doses of humility and curiosity that like are central to just the way that you specifically go about things. And I'm very appreciative of that as somebody who works with you on a regular basis, especially that curiosity piece. I think curiosity might be one of the lost arts as we have things like Google and all that stuff. I intentionally didn't Google something the other day, and I just wondered about it. And I was
that's good.
It was really lame. It was like this is so just off topic, but it was I was like the Stanley Cup. Does it so like it goes to the winning team? And all the players, like each one gets it for a week. So does it like then just go back to the NHL after that? Like, do they just then just like go to the top of the lineup and just kind of keep doing that for a year?
Yeah.
I eventually texted a buddy and he explained to me it's kind of like they have 3 Stanley Cups. There's one that travels to the team, one that stays at the Hall of Fame, and one that travels like to events. And I was like, is there one that's more important? Is there a real Stanley Cup? Or are we talking like, is this like a Trinity situation, like 3 in 1? Like, I don't know. And he did say it's like the Trinity. So hockey is a holy sport, it turns out. But yeah, that one's for free.
That's good. But see, I love that you stepped in curiosity and you let it happen.
Yeah,
you let the curiosity sit there for a minute.
It's so silly because it was for something so small, but like
we don't do that
very often.
We don't.
We don't let ourselves sit in uncertainty often.
Yes.
Especially
such a good point.
Like, yeah, we live in the social media age where it's hot takes and definitive statements and all that, and I just am craving a lot more nuance and a lot more humility and a little more like, I don't know. I'm just I'm gonna stick to my values and stay faithful and trust and hope that the little things that I'm practicing, like the little habits that we're breaking every day, eventually lead me to look like a certain kind of person. So, but it starts with that small stuff, and it always seems silly, but it's like starting running. Like, you're not going to run a mile or 2 the first time, maybe, but you might run a quarter mile. You might like walk that mile. I don't know. I feel like we're always looking for that quick answer, but what I keep hearing from you in this conversation is that doesn't exist. The answers might always be there, but we're always looking to discover it, and it takes a lot of habit breaking and intentionality to do it, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's other pieces, other parts to your question I don't feel like I answered, and that is, when I start a workshop, when any of us start speaking in front of a group, there are some basics that seem pointless or mundane or whatever, unimportant, that actually create felt safety in the room. For example, if you are hosting, a group of people that have never been in that building, do they know where the bathrooms are? Do they know how long we're going to be speaking today? How long they're going to sit? Do they know if there's going to be PowerPoint today, or do they know there's going to be activities? They're going to have to get out of their chair. Just like some of those, just like making people aware of things right at the start. can create felt safety.
Expectations
Absolutely.
are so key, and
It's
like
so simple, but so important.
I heard I read a quote, and I had a coworker that used to say this to me a lot. That it was like, I might butcher it, but it was like, uncommunicated expectations lead to like resentment or something like that, like, or just lead to resentment in general. And like, I mean, it's so true, because like, if we, the lack of communication piece, but like, yeah, that those expectations being set, just knowing like this is, I mean, because people get antsy, I get antsy in those situations, and I don't always feel safe if I'm like, am I going to be here for like 30 minutes? Am I going to be here for like a couple hours? I've got stuff to do. I don't know. I've got my own worries. I've got all that stuff. I didn't know you did that. That's really cool. See, okay, I need to come to one of these things. They sound great.
Oh, well, yeah, again, I'm not the most important person in the room, but what's cool is what happens as things start to unfold. And that's the other piece about creating felt safety, is having the ability from, as the person presenting content, to honor everyone in the room and to make sure that there are voices that may appear in the room that are dishonoring, like honoring them, but also making sure they know it's not okay to be dishonoring to others in the room. And that's like, group dynamics.
What a tension to hold. Yeah. Like, how do we make people feel like they matter without infringing on other people's ability and right to matter too?
Yeah. And then there's other things like, we're talking about trauma. We're talking about mental health challenges. And so that can be such a downer. But I know this is, maybe different than other people, but I don't think I want to start off with like, welcome to the workshop on trauma,
Buckle up, kids. We're going to cry.
I might start with a joke. We might start with a game. We might start with an activity. I'm an extrovert at Enneagram 7. And so I want to start and have moments that are upbeat, that feel like they release the tension a little bit. They give us a little bit of breathing room so that we don't feel like we're stepping into group therapy. you know?
I feel like we've lost the art of play in our society. And part of it comes with like the loss of third spaces and all that, if you're into that. But like, yeah, like we don't, I mean, I saw this as a youth pastor that like I realized like, oh, we need to be playing more, like, and there's actual value in this to like group dynamics and to understanding each other a little better and just being friends and like caring about each other. Like,
absolutely.
That doesn't happen in those, like, doesn't happen very easily in those settings where it's like, all right, let's sit down and we're going to crack open this workbook and we're going to get through it. All right. We're hitting everything.
Oh gosh.
And it's like, no, because that's not how most people live. Like we all need to blow off steam, and like there's so much unseen power and impact in that, and in the energy that creates between those relationships is like palpable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to be playing more. So dodgeball at the next workshop. Are we doing that?
Heck yeah.
Dodgeball.
Kickball.
Oh, kickball. I do love a good game of kickball. Oh, my gosh. Incredible. Like, truly underrated game. Actually, I think it's properly rated. But I do love playing a game or two. That hasn't left me.
Well, that's good.
No, yeah, exactly. I didn't get old that quick. Because like once you leave like youth ministry, you get old like really quick.
Oh gosh.
You just realize you're like, oh shoot, like I don't know stuff anymore. although right before this call you did use the word based, and that was impressive. You used it properly. It was
I have
incredible.
young people in my life. I just copy what they say.
It's good. That's, you know what? That's all it takes. Is just that's all I do.
It's all I got.
Just mirror, baby. Man, what keeps you going? Like, what keeps you inspired? Like, what sorts of things are you consuming to like learn more about trauma and trauma-informed care? Like, what's like your lifelong learning look like in this?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would say that it's so many stories that cross my path where I tell people what I do and they're like, oh, yeah, say more about that. Or, oh, that's such good work. And I'm thinking, it's not my work. It's all of our work. It's all how all of us step in relationships. That's really what it is. But it is, walking, to use our metaphor, walking the journey or walking the trail with people who are just in hard times, but, being able to see community around them. And if they're people of faith, being able to sense God's presence in the suffering. And that it's just so powerful. And it's just exactly where I want to be. And so I love where those stories sort of erupt. And if it's like, the TV show The Bear, or if it's, some podcast that I listen to, or if it's a book that I dive into, or if it is, opening up the Bible and I read the story of Jacob from a whole different lens. And like, he was just always playing second fiddle. So we give Jacob a really hard time. He's a guy in the Bible with definitely some human faults. And we're just like, we people like generations, separated from him. Just, it's so easy for us to be like, bro, like, what is your deal? But like, absolute, if I read it through the lens of what I understand about trauma and its impact and mental health challenges and relationships, I can just see like a lot of insecurity in him and just fear, and maybe not surrounding himself with the people that are going to be the most supportive. Certainly growing up in a situation where his parenting wasn't balanced, I would say. And so it's just kind of a lens of seeing the world. And man, I just appreciate, being able to, we live and I live in a country and we live in an age where there's so much content out there and there's so many, books and media out there to really kind of unpack from this angle. It's almost like practice for me in my own life.
Yeah.
Like I see this character over there and they're really responding in a certain way. And I think, well, how would I respond? Like,
it's putting legs on this thing. Like it's because like, I'm not going to draw everything back to being a youth pastor, but like truly, like I had to ask the question a lot, like, why should this matter? Like, why does the gospel matter to a 14-year-old boy? Like,
right.
Like who doesn't like, I don't, you have to try and bridge that gap and you have to try and figure that out. But like the best way is to just start practicing it in your real life. Yeah, that is good. That's really, really good. You mentioned podcasts and books. Are there any that you would recommend?
Oh my goodness. Whew, it just depends on what I'm reading and listening to in the moment. But Kurt Thompson's podcast, oh gosh, we'll have the link
we'll
for you. But I think it's Being Known, called the Being Known podcast, I believe. It's so good. Oh my goodness. It's basically the producer and an interviewer just connecting with Kurt on all things biochemistry and trauma and childhood things and spirituality and where it all plays in. He's just a master of putting all of those kinds of things together, and his books are amazing. But to get to hear his actual voice on the podcast or see him in person in a workshop is truly special. On the side of fiction, which I'm not as good at leaning into, I'm much more of a nonfiction person. I'm a fan of Friedrich Bachmann. He's a Swedish author, and it is not family friendly, to be clear.
Hey-o.
And but it is just all of his stories. One of my favorites is called Anxious People, and it's where a bunch of people get stuck in an apartment together. Disjointed, discommunicated people get stuck in a space, and it's having to navigate that space with all of their own their own nervous system, entering into the space. And his craft of recognizing interpersonal relationships and our own weaknesses and fears and strengths is just really has a great angle and a great power over communicating that. So I'm a fan.
That's so cool. That sounds awesome. I'm actually might actually pick that up.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's great.
Like, that sounds kind of incredible.
And back to hockey, there's another series from him called Beartown. It's a very small, it's about a small community in Canada. Wait, no, it wouldn't be Canada.
I mean, they have hockey there.
I mean, edit this. I feel like it's maybe Sweden. Like maybe logically
we're leaving
it would
it all
be
in.
Sweden.
We're leaving it.
Okay, yeah, okay, whatever. Anyway, it's this isolated community, and all they have is hockey kind of thing. And then they start to learn that actually they have way more than hockey. And
they have the friends they made along the way.
well, it's not quite, Welcome Back, Kotter sort of like vibe, but yeah, it's good. It's good. It's very dark. There's some dark themes in there, but yeah.
How has this whole journey been for you? Like, how has it changed you? How has it shaped you? Like, I've worked with you a lot on content. And like it's interesting to like look at old content of like we're not even sure what this is. Like we're kind of like creating this as we go, and so there's so much learning that happens within that. And now we're at a point where like I know what we do and like I know who we are, but like what was that process like getting there?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's see, how much time do we have? I mean, the concept of what James Trail has been on my heart for probably 10 or 15 years. And it was in 2020 where I definitely sensed the Lord's leading. And this is faith language for like, I really sensed it was time to get started, to get going on this. And it has been quite the process. And I think the fun part of it is that it's ever changing, it's ever shifting. And I think the hard part about it is that it's ever shifting and ever changing. And so, you have to take the good with the bad with that. I know that it has really challenged me to strive to be the best leader that I can be. Because, we've all sat under a lot of different leaders in our lives. And one of the things that's so important to me is that we don't just, walk the content, for others, but we're actually walking it internally as well. So I want all of my interactions, I want our staff meeting, I want my relationships with our team to be trauma informed. I don't want to like lead some workshop where I'm encouraging people to have empathetic listening, but I won't do that with our own team. Like that's hypocritical. So I almost said hypothetical.
Hypocritical.
Yeah. It's hypocritical.
It's extra critical. Yeah.
So I have really been, leaning into those spaces and really trying to not just over here analyze myself as well, but also ask the team like, hey, I know I have blind spots. So if a blind spot is showing up in our relationship, something that I need to be aware of, or a way that I'm communicating that is not honoring or seeing you, please tell me. And I know you've been really good about that, and I know others have been good about that. And man, I just think that grows me as a leader. But also, I feel like I have to know this stuff. So it really pushes me to, keep current on content, to keep reading things, to really, lean into people, especially if they have an expertise in an area that I'm weak in, We are looking at interviewing some people who have some very specific, interviewing them for the podcast that have some specific areas of expertise that I've know not enough about. And so I'm excited about that. That doesn't threaten me. That makes me excited to want to lean in and learn more. So I'm absolutely changed by every inch of this organization. And I think that what's hard sometimes is people say, like, say you catch up with someone you haven't talked to in 6 months to a year, and they're like, hey, how's it going? It's hard for me to not talk about James Trail first, because the path of James Trail is inextricably linked with my spiritual path. And it's helping me to lean in as a parent. It's helping me to lean in as a wife, as a friend, as a daughter, as a sister. And so when I talk about James Trail, it's definitely not about like, oh, we're great. It's like just the process that I'm walking through. And for me, that process is with the Lord, and how that is impacting all of my relationships is really key and central to a lot of what's going on for me right now.
Man. What would you say to anyone out there who's struggling with trauma, mental health, you name it, however they define it, and maybe feels alone in it?
Here is my message. You are not alone. And I know you hear that from other people. You see that on your Instagram scrolling or Facebook or whatever. And it can seem very like flat, trite, overstated sort of words. But not only am I saying it from a point of view of that your nervous system is interacting with other nervous systems, whether we realize it or not. And it's who are we willing to invite in to that space and step into the fear of that, to admit that we need community or that we need more community, and then take the effort, because y'all, I know, like, it takes effort to build that community that knows you and sees you and honors you. And so one question I have for you in that, really two questions, is number one, for me, the role of faith and my relationship with Jesus is central to my community. I can't imagine not having him as a part of, what I would look at and consider as community. And number two is, if I'm struggling, and in seasons when I've struggled to sense the community around me, because they're there, I just need to sense them, right? My question to myself is, who has reached out to me in the last 6 months and I didn't respond, and why? And number two, who have I spent time with in the last 6 months who, when I walked away from that interaction, I felt seen and known? And do I need to reach out to them again and say, hey, let's do coffee again? And that takes energy. I get it. And sometimes it's easy for me to sit back and say, well, why am I always the person who has to reach out? Like, I completely understand that space. But also, I know I need community. And so what do I need to do to have the energy to be able to do those kinds of, initial reach out or reaching back out? Because that's how community can be built. It's not the only way. And I'm absolutely an advocate for in-person. I love video calls, and those are fine, but like I find it very difficult, if not impossible, to have community over social media, or have community even over, other sorts of platforms, if that makes sense. I think it's got to be, it's got to be in person. It's got to be, or video calls, but like, this person is someone I used to do community with in person. Like there's just something magical that happens in the space when two people are in the same room. Yeah. So
always our last question. Where do you see beauty?
I see beauty in my kids. I see beauty in the ways that all 5 are young adults and just hardcore leaning into the challenges of their space. I see beauty in the first snow that just happened, and boy, was it a snow. I see beauty in this place, this interaction today, and the ways that your questions have really teased out some things in me that I've needed to kind of think through and have some answers for, even for myself, beyond our listeners. And I see beauty in new relationships, the different people that I get the privilege of having contact with, and I see the Lord in all of that. All of those good gifts and good things happening are because of Him and His grace over my life.
Man, Meredith, you are truly one of the best humans that I interact with on a pretty regular basis. I'm not even just saying that because you pay me money to make podcasts. I am saying that because you truly, I can testify that you are an open book, and you are someone who is open to feedback, who is truly curious, who really, just in a staff meeting today, was asking for ways that you could do better on something. It's always that. And so as somebody who works for you and with you, it truly is an honor, and it does make a difference, in the ways that I see myself, and I see myself in this role. So keep doing what you're doing, because it's pretty awesome, and I hope that more people will encounter it and discover it and all the things. So yeah.
Well, the feeling is very mutual.
Well, that's really nice. It better be mutual. I did throw up in your sink. So
those feelings are not mutual.
Those feelings, I don't know about that one, but
that feeling can stay where it was.
Truly, that feeling can go away forever. Man, I hadn't thrown up since middle school. It was stupid.
Right? It's like a Seinfeld moment.
Oh, it's annoying. That's fine. Well, Meredith, thank you so much for taking the time with me to hop on this and answer my many questions. And to our listeners, we will see you on the trail.